Hail Caesar! I'm just messing with you. I'm not actually gonna wear this. I originally thought it'd be kind of fun, but it's a little distracting given that people don't actually dress like this in Dungeons and Dragons. I just thought it would be fun given that it's fantasy themed and this is kind of a fantasy outfit. So I'm gonna go change into something a little more appropriate. Okay, that's better. So for this episode on and in comes the white tiger soaked in blood, walking with its head down in sort of a sad gait, and the ranger didn't come. And this animal companion sort of lost its master, and even tying it into something like that, it really hit home the level of loss and how is this city going to cope with such losses, and it's going to change their lives forever. And really all this was just a bunch of people at a table role-playing characters and rolling dice and making decisions. There's a little bit of mechanics that underline the game, but essentially it's part of a genre known as role-playing games. And they're sort of like writing a book, but every major character in the book is a different person, one of your friends. And they're responsible for role-playing that character's personality, decision-making, things like that. And then there's a game master or dungeon master, which was me in this story, who runs the sort of the other things in the world, side characters, world events, settings, stuff like that. And so it's a very fun game to be able to go in and experience being people that you're not and looking from their points of view, or having tactical challenges or strategic challenges, or there's so many different elements of depth. Unlike any sort of book or movie or game, there's a limitless amount of not only levels of gameplay, but sort of story arcs and branches and how things can turn out, whether due to decision making or just a bad roll of the dice. And from this, again, appears a lot of the most wild stories that a lot of people remember for life, even though there's something that is totally invented in people's imaginations. But in the end of the day, our entire lives are just our imaginations, so in a sense it's almost no real from anything else in the world. Sometimes people will play music at certain elements to make it more climactic. One of the characters would wear a sort of ninja scarf to help them feel more immersed in character. Somebody else would kind of wear like a hat. There's a thing called LARPing. I haven't done it before, but that's where people actually stay in character and they dress up a lot more. My brother actually met his wife at an event like that, though again it's not something I've tried, though I'm curious to see what it's like. You'll also get into a lot of absurd situations because people are unpredictable, and so a game master might have a story planned, and the characters don't necessarily do at all what he planned. And recently there was a game where one of the characters is actually working for the villain, and the party doesn't know this, so the whole time he's passing messages at certain drop-off points to have the villain keep tabs on their activities, what they know, things like that. And it's kind of fun. And there's another where the rogue finds a bunch of treasure and he steals like some of it but not all of it, and they're like, wow, like that's really admirable. You're not like most rogues that would just steal a bunch of stuff, and he totally just is another rogue that stole stuff and got away with it. And it's just kind of fun. They still don't know to this point that he'd been stealing from the party the whole time. And you get all these sort of absurd fun activities, and it's a really social, real-time activity. Going a little bit deeper though, I think that Dungeons & Dragons has a bit more potential than that as well. For example, I personally believe that we're at a state in life where we have abundant resources, big data, more unity between people across the world, and that we could sort of unify more governmentally. And so in this campaign, I created a group, the one that actually took over Kinjito, called the Ashar. And they're based on a long dead prophet who thought that one day a great evil would rise and that the unified good and civil races would have to band together to defeat it, or else they'd be living in darkness. And many years have passed, and as with many things in general, empires tend to get corrupt over time. So this takes place hundreds of years later, where it's almost become an empire just for the sake of being an empire, where they're not giving back exactly the resources they're taking in, expanding for the sake of expanding. Meanwhile, there's a small side branch of the church where it's like paladins and clerics who still very much believe in unity and doing good. And so that sort of reconciles themes of corruption and how does unity outcompete competition, things like that. And it's a good philosophical model to see how people actually behave in this world, not just human characters, but the characters they represent in those different points of view. There's also another character in a different game that's not Dungeons & Dragons that I play called Blackjack. And it takes place actually in San Francisco, and he lives in the neighborhood I live in now, Bayview. It's a low-income black neighborhood. And I made this character to be able to better think through what life is like for people on the streets here, because in this Shadowrun game, San Francisco has been taken over by the Japanese in the future, and they're very racist against metahumans, including orcs. So my character has to deal with a lot of handicaps about having biases and restrictions placed on him. And so that's just a good way for me to kind of think through and empathize and relate to people as an exercise, but it's also really fun. So hopefully you can see that there's a lot of different sorts of gameplay elements. It's a fun activity, memories are made, you kind of learn things from it. So I highly recommend it as just an activity to try out with friends sometime. It often helps if somebody's played before, and I've been finding more and more that a lot more people than I ever thought play. And Dungeons & Dragons, I've also noticed, is starting to become like a very cool activity, which is not something that I'd ever had be the case growing up. Like it seems like just about every girl nowadays who I date or see, when I tell them about Dungeons & Dragons, their faces light up, and they're like, whoa, I want to play, that's so cool. And it is cool, and so that's why I'm making a video about it, is just to help spread something that's so fun with people. And even a lot of celebrities play it, like Vin Diesel, James Franco, Stephen Colbert, like many others actually actively play this right now. So I just wanted to share this with you and introduce you to an idea that maybe it's an activity you'd want to try sometime.